begin to illuminate the grandeur of the infinite. The word infinite, or even better, the phrase, the creative force of the infinite, better captures the incomprehensible depth and complexities of the processes that drive the creation of galaxies, stars, planets, Earth, and us. This phrase, the creative force of the infinite, helps me to see and to feel beyond both stories, the old story of a determined universe, the old story of a random universe, to a new story of a mysteriously creative universe. So for me, when I say the word God, it almost makes God too small. The word God doesn't fit God anymore, because we think of a person, we think of an image of a being that looks like us, and it is far, in my view, it is far vaster than us and far more mysterious and intelligent and creative. So we are actually an expression of that. So we're not even separate. Even though we have a story of separation, we can't be separate from it. And, we're learning the consequences of when we try to pretend we are. We learn the consequences now if you look at the global situation. So that kind of gives you a sense for, what the book purports about, the infinite versus God or Creator.
Well, isn't it within the Bible itself that God, the God that is talked about in the Holy Bible, is actually telling us that He looks like us, that we were created in His image? Therefore, ever since the Bible has been read, based on the book of Genesis, where He says, and God said, "Let us create man in our likeness, in our image." So doesn't that mean that God looks like us? And this is where we get the idea, and this is where we get the concept of the God figure that so many artists have painted over the years.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, certainly, and if you take that interpretation literally, then yes, we are going to get images that we've had, throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. We're going to get images of, especially in Europe, the old white guy in a beard.
Right.
And so the question in my mind is that, okay, do we need to take it that literally? Is it proper to take it that literally? What are the consequences of taking those scriptures that literally? And then backing up and saying, now wait a minute, what did the original text actually say? And not the Greek, because Greek was an intermediary language. Jesus spoke Aramaic, and the Hebrews obviously spoke a form of Hebrew. So it's really interesting to hear, and again, I can't say I'm a religious scholar. This is one of the things, I wish I had several lifetimes to get several thousand degrees. One of them being religious studies, like, what did those guys actually say? What really was being said at that point? Yeah. And was there, and actually Elaine Pagels, the woman who's in charge, she wrote a book called The Gnostic Gospels, in finding these texts that emerged in the Middle East somewhere around the 1940s that painted the Gospels in a very different light. And she talks about, well, now, wait a minute, there's a different story here. And she talks about, the point I was actually cueing in on there was an organizational structure that needed a centralized control. The early Christian church was very diverse and very dynamic, and many parts of it were very mystical and very, very unorganized and disorganized. Because the idea is that you really can't organize and institutionalize spirituality and mysticism. And yet there were other sects of Christianity that did have that hierarchy and did have that control. And those social structures had more power. They were able to organize and then eventually, essentially get rid of those other interpretations of the Bible and those other interpretations of the Gospels. So it's not enough just to look at what does the Word say. It's also very important to say what were the social and political structures in place as those words began to be written.
Exactly. I've often asked, how would the Bible be different if it was written today with the knowledge that we have of science, of astronomy, of physics, mathematics? So I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate that viewpoint. In fact, the question I'm going to ask you before we go to the break, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it, is in today's society, do we really still need religion? Or is religion the downfall of society? Food for thought. Exonation, my very special guest this hour is David Christopher. He's the author of The Holy Universe, a new story of creation for the heart, soul, and spirit. And David's website is www.theholyuniverse.com. That's www.theholyuniverse.com. David Christopher and I will be back on the other side of the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, for more information on the Holy Universe, visit David Christopher's website at www.theholyuniverse.com.
The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN-TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Exonation, David Christopher is our special guest this hour. He's the author of The Holy Universe, a new story of creation for the heart, soul, and spirit. His website is www.theholyuniverse.com. David, before we went to the news break at the bottom of the hour, I asked you a question. In today's society, do we really need religion? Or is religion the downfall of modern society when we look what's happening in the world today between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the West? You know, it begs to ask the question, are we stuck in a religion that has not grown with the sheep, so to speak? Or do we really need a religion? Is it time for us to take responsibility for our own actions? You know, being kind, being considerate, you know, in implementing the Ten Commandments on our own without having to go through the entire religious philosophies and its pomp and circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's something very valuable that people want and need with ritual. With story. I mean, as with anything, when the story and facts collide, story trumps every single time. So whether or not we want to be story-making beings or not, we create stories for ourselves. Everyone has a bottom line, I believe, that really can't be addressed scientifically. Even scientists have beliefs. They believe that science is the only way through truth. So for me, when you were asking the question as far as, you know, with ISIS, with the fundamentalism of religions that are causing so much pain and havoc in the world today, I don't think the issue is with the religions in of themselves. The issue is with anyone who has a fundamentalist belief or a fundamentalist philosophy that only I have the real story, only we have the real story, and everyone else is wrong, or everyone else is lost, or everyone else is the infidel, or everyone else is the unsaved or unchosen. So it's less that we need, whether or not we're going to get rid of religion or not is besides the point, because we're not. Mm-hmm. It serves such a deep need within humanity to make sense of the universe. So what I was hoping with this book, as well as with other, that it joins the chorus of others saying there is a better story. And part of the story, too, the story of planetary mind that the sage talks about, is a deep sense of humility. We have learned a lot, and we're a very intelligent species, but there is so much we don't know. And so when we start to assert things, when we start to say, this is the way it is, or what I believe is the only way to believe, mm-hmm. or this is just the way it is, we start endangering not only ourselves personally, but we start endangering those around us with that sense, if we hold on tightly to that sense. So it's the sage says early in the book that it's important to know that this story of planetary mind is a young story. It will change as we learn more about ourselves and the galaxy and our place in it. So you want to hold on to this story with a very light grasp and even willing to let it fly off into history as we learn more and more about ourselves. I mean, how many times has science says, what we thought was wrong, but now we really know what's right. The latest research or the latest study, which goes counterintuitive to what we believed before. So for me, the issue is not so much religion per se, it's how we treat religion and how we think that the way we believe is the only way to believe when we start going to these small collectives. That's the danger, and that's the growth area. That's the area that humanity needs to grow into. And we'll see how well that takes. I mean, sometimes you look at the world and you think, Lordy, it's just not going to come together. Yeah. I mean, it's really difficult at times.
You've said that the crises that we're facing on Earth might be the best thing that ever happened to humanity.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, what that is the second part of the book talks about what do we learn from this evolutionary story? What can it teach us? And the sage at one point, there are many things we can take from it, but the sage at one point says, you remember way back when in the story of the creation of the web of life, what happened? He asked, the seeker is asked that by the sage. Mm-hmm. And did you remember what happened? And what they go back to, I'm actually flipping to it in the book, to what's called the oxygen catastrophe. So about 3 billion years ago, when life figured out how to photosynthesize, to use solar energy as a source of energy, and it caused a catastrophe. And I'll just read to you a couple of stanzas.
Please.
For as the beings who seized starlight to strip apart water and air became stronger and multiplied, they gave off oxygen, a vile and poisonous fire that slowly spread and turned the color of the sky an ominous, deadly blue. For this oxygen, this poison, destroyed the wastes of one that might have been food for others, rendered inedible the flesh of earth, even penetrated the beings and killed them. Oxygen wrought havoc across Earth. It destroyed swarms of the tiny beings, their food, and their colonies of life. Now, James Lovelock, who was the scientist who put forth what became known as the Gaia hypothesis, that Earth itself is a living system, a self-regulating living system, he actually said we came very, very close to losing life right then, 3 billion years ago, because oxygen was such a catastrophic event. And life created that. Life created these catastrophic events and this catastrophic conditions. And yet what happened is that some beings figured out how to use oxygen for their own ends. And to make a long story short, that's how we got multicellular animals. That's how we got the complex cell. That's how we started getting multicellular animals and plants and land-based plants, land-based animals. We literally wouldn't be here without that catastrophe. So it's possible. The sage uses this as a metaphor for the fact that maybe the catastrophes that we've created for ourselves are going to serve as the wake-up call that this is serious, humanity. your civilizations are certainly in danger, perhaps even your species. And perhaps we need that catastrophe to wake us up collectively.